Good morning, Dr. Adedibu.
Good morning, sir.
How are you doing?
Well, I'm fine.
So good to talk to you this morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Let me allow you to introduce yourself to our audience, and then we get to the questions.
Thank you very much. I'm Babatunde Adedibu. I'm a missiologist and currently serve as the provost of the Christian Bible College, which is an affiliate of University of Ibadan and Redeemers University. Also, I am a research fellow with the Department of Practical Theology and Missiology, University of Stellenbosch, and a published author, and also someone conversant with various issues in practical theology and missiology in general.
Brilliant. Thank you. As a missiologist working in West Africa, how do you see the field playing itself out? What's happening in missiology in West Africa?
I think quite a lot is happening, and I think I must first of all give due credit to colleagues in South Africa and East Africa. They've done marvelously well, particularly in terms of indigenization, particularly South Africa, probably due to apartheid and the likes. A lot has been done on decolonization. I want to give credit to someone like late Professor Mbiti, the great man, the philosopher, distinguished missiologist as well, who did a lot of works in terms of his contribution on indigenization as well. In West Africa, the field is quite gradually emerging, and I want to think it's due to the fact that a very first observation is the fact that most universities or colleges in West Africa only offer church history as a discipline. And so you wouldn't find them training missiologists as a training South Africa or East Africa. So it's a novel field that you only find church historians being the doyen in West Africa and taking missiological courses as a trade. But nevertheless, we've had great inroads made by scholars from the Catholic denomination who trained outside and are contributing, particularly into the area of contextualization. A lot has been written by some of the scholars who are Catholic priests and are doing marvelously well.
Can you mention a few names?
There's a particular name that rings a bell, who has done marvelously well. Just let me try and remember during the course of the interview, I will be able to mention the name.
Okay.
Yes, please.
That's all right. You have published quite a lot in the past few months. I know that you've made a contribution to the African Public Theology book that's coming out of Langam in the next week or so.
Yeah.
Could you talk a bit about that essay?
Well, I think, I don't know whether I published or not, but I think I've just done few in the recent past. So I think just this January, a compendium was produced, edited by Philip Ullman and Webb Grab and Mary Louise Frist, of which I contributed a chapter to the edited volume published by Routledge. It's entitled Africa Initiated Christianity and the Decolonization of Development.
That's right.
Which is a critical view with respect to sustainable development within the Pentecostal and African independent stream of the Christian faith. The thrust of the book essentially is the fact that the editors and the contributors gave an overview of the overarching perspectives of the contributions of Pentecostalism as well as African independent churches. Although I know in terms of mapping the categorization, there's an overlap between AIC and Pentecostal churches as a triad. Some obviously would want to be referred to as Pentecostal, while some will surely want to retain their identity as being indigenous. But nevertheless, the whole thrust of the publication is divided into about, I think, about 5 chapters, which looked at the perspectives of the spirit empowerment on AIC. Likewise, also you have perspectives from Nigeria, of which I contributed a chapter. Likewise, and my chapter is entitled Approaches to Transformation and Development, the Case of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Nigeria. Likewise, a valid contribution in that segment is also from Professor Olufunke Adeboye, who incidentally is the first female Dean of Faculty of Arts of the University of Lagos. She wrote a very, very interesting article, which is entitled, A Starving Man Cannot Shout Hallelujah, African Pentecostal Churches and the Challenge of Promoting Sustainable Development. Being an historian, she gives a very good insight into the history, which is not so popular in the public domain as it were. The next section also looks at the Ghanaian perspectives, which gives balance to the West African perspective of things. But not only that, you also find that the Francophone also feature, like from Burkina Faso. Also, there's a perspective on that, and the Zimbabwean perspectives. And in conclusion, you have the South African perspectives. And other scholars that also of note that did a very good job in that. You find Asamoah Gyedu from Ghana, the current head of Trinity College Ghana. Sure. Likewise, you find Ignatius Swartz, who is an authority on development from South Africa. Sure. You also find someone like Dietrich Werner, the German scholar, also contributed to the edited volume. Brilliant. Well, if I want to talk about my article in that, essentially I argue along the lines of Afe Adogame, in that write-up that development should be considered from below, rather than following the Western epistemological approach of definition of development, which is alien to the lived religion approach of Africans. And in doing that, the whole thrust of the argument is that some of the econometrics utilized, if by any standard, should be considered in Africa, then nothing is happening. The second strong argument is the fact that a lot is happening, and is happening through the Pentecostal and charismatic movement, essentially hanging along the lines of Yamoussoukro in terms of progressive Pentecostalism, that a lot is being done within the social community development by these indigenous Pentecostal churches, which ultimately will lead to sustainable development of Africans. And I looked at the Redeemed Christian Church of God, which is perhaps one of the most visible Pentecostal churches in Africa, and also with presence in almost 198 countries of the world. So this gives insights as an example of one of the several Pentecostal movements in Africa that is contributing to sustainable development of its communities where they are situated. So that is just a summary of my section in that edited volume.
Okay, brilliant. And then you have another essay coming out in the African Public Theology.
Yes, that is a classic publication in the sense that it's a compendium of about 30 scholars, including practitioners, including public figures, that is entirely African. Okay. And the focus is public theology. And these started as a result of the desire of the general editor in the person of Sunday Hagan with respect to what is the new Africa should look like. What are some of the issues that are confronting Africa? And as such, there is a need for us to look at these issues and be able to address some of these challenges. And so what a Christian perspective towards it. And I contributed a chapter on that, which is entitled Migration and Human Traffic.
Right.
Human Trafficking, which is one of the articles in the compendium. And the thrust of this particular segment is to look at, generally, I tried as much as possible to look at the concept of migration. That is not a new phenomenon. Likewise, I also considered the fact that migration is deeply embedded in the biblical narrative, starting from the book of Genesis. Not only that, the experience of migrants in the process of moving from one culture to the other, traversing the face of the heart, not only in the biblical times, but even contemporary society, migration entails a lot of dangers, hazards, and emotional uncertainties with respect to the host context, the dangers, social, economic, cultural discontinuities that most of these migrants experience. But not only that, we also looked at the issue of the fact that there's so many push and pull dynamics that influence migration. And in this piece, I talked about essentially some of the reasons why a young, able-bodied African will leave and decides to go through the Sahara Desert, the Mediterranean Sea, in a dinghy boat, all in the hope of arriving in the mother's country or in Italy for a life of heaven on earth, which most times is a mirage, but oftentimes end in disaster. And so I look at some of the pros and cons of migration, the misconception that migrants have nothing to offer within the society, which is a fallacy, because if you trace the history of Britain today, trace the history of America, you find what the Jews have contributed. In Britain, you find that so many heroes of our past Africans have played prominent roles in terms of the social, economic, and political development in Britain as well. Even the current, the preceding leaders of the opposition, all at one time or the other, face the reality that they were migrants. But now they are now second or third generation British citizens, as it were. And so there's an erroneous notion that migrants don't have anything to offer, which is not true. Not only that, also is the fact that I was able to argue using the World Bank report of the positive effect of African diaspora on African exports that is higher than the average effect of migration, which points to the fact that the migrants overcome the major challenges and eventually challenges of African trade. And so, moreover, migrants also contribute to their host countries in terms of their economic contributions, in terms of manpower, in terms of capital, and in terms of fiscal resources, not to talk of intellectual astuteness, of which you are doing where you are. So you find us all over, all over the world. For instance, the United States, it has been found in a research that the highest level of migrants that are educated in the United States are Nigerians, and that's a massive plus. An average Nigerian you find in the United States would be at least a graduate compared to the indigenous African American. Then I also look at the current issue of human trafficking with its wickedness and its exploitative tendency. You realize that there was the passing of bills, several bills in the House of Parliament in Britain some years back with respect to human slavery, which talks about issues like human trafficking, slavery, abuse, prostitution. And this all reflects around the Palermo Protocol that was signed in December 2000, which prohibits trafficking of persons either through recruitment, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of threats or force. And it gave quite an extensive definition of what human trafficking is all about. And this in itself provides a much required space for international agencies to collaborate and address the issue of human trafficking. Just a few days ago, you will notice in the newspaper, on social media, there was a case of a Lebanese gentleman that put up a lady, a Nigerian lady for sale, advertised the lady, a 30-year-old lady, able, strong, and all for just $1,000 on Facebook. And just 3 days after, the gentleman has reacted, all because of public outcry. So you see a lot is happening with respect to human trafficking. Not only that, migrants are vulnerable in human trafficking because of the fact that their desire to move from one context to the other, basically to enhance themselves. Some are fleeing persecution, some economic migrants, some political, but oftentimes the hardest are the economic migrants that are not able to go through the legitimate routes of migration, but wants to escape through financial challenges of going through the legitimate process of migration. And so not only that they want to move because of failed state status of most African countries, poor economic situation, poverty, and a host of other issues. And human traffickers along the line have played tremendous role in terms of end-to-end arrangement by these human traffickers, which makes them to be extremely vulnerable. Some end up being abused, some end up being raped. So this article in itself is a major perspective with respect to the challenges of human trafficking. And I think the concluding part of it is just discouraging migration. I know this sounds hard, but the reality is the fact that in the face of choosing between life and death, I think migrants will want to live rather than die in the course of their journey. And how do the state concerned look at the issues of discouraging migration? And the key thing is to address some of the push and pull factors. If the economy is addressed and is good, stable, people have jobs, there's security, then migration will reduce to a large extent. Secondly, also, is the fact that there should be more public sensitization with respect to the dangers of illicit migration and making use of illegitimate routes for migration. Those that pay men to take them from one Sahara desert to the other through the Mediterranean Sea have always ended up being abused in one form or the other. And various outlines are given in terms of the process of information campaign, community awareness, public jingle, public officers, sensitizing their citizens towards the dangers of migration, and giving them a shock therapy of what might likely befall someone who goes on an illicit migration route. The last one, I think, which is centered on the caring of the migrant itself, gives a biblical insight into what should be our responsibility towards migrants from the biblical perspectives. And I think the uniqueness of this work also is that there are questions for discussion in the volume. It's an easy read, devoid of strong academic jargons, just for public accessibility. So many people will find it quite helpful to gloss over, to read, and I think it's going to be a major rallying point for Africans to have produced this kind of text.
Sure. Wow. That's good. Sounds really exciting. As I said, Langam got in touch about it, and I can't wait to get my hands on the book. So this is really good. We lost a mutual friend in December.
Yeah.
We can't have this conversation without mentioning his name. I miss Pastor Gabriel Dia very, very dearly. Still haven't recovered.
Well, it's I don't think I can recover. I must be honest.
Sure.
Well, I think he's a brother from another mother.
That's right.
For me, and he was incredibly loyal and faithful. He was there for me when I needed him most in my life, and someone that I've known for almost 25 years of my life. The better part of my journey towards achieving what I've achieved as a scholar, I think it was there with me as a family member, not as a friend. It was a marvelous gentleman, a complete gentleman for that. He was a gentle giant. So rest in peace.
Please. Let's try and land this, and basically by talking about mission and the African church in Europe, which is something I look up to you for guidance in this conversation. What is happening? What do you think is going on?
Well, I think I should pose that question to you. Let it be the reverse order now. I think I want to. I'm extremely grateful that we now have at least a very active playing field. Africans contributing to the discussion quite well and well articulated. I think I have to commend you coming on the scene first with your publication, the first one, which was the proceed of your doctoral thesis, and this second one on multiculturalism, again, which hopefully we intensify the discussion. Sure. Also, is the likes of Olofujano also. I've seen some of his articles of late, which and the edited volume as well. That he just released some few weeks back. Sure. All this points to the fact that Africans are now contributing to the discussion, and we are almost on the heels of our Caribbean brothers who have done marvelously well, in the likes of Joe Odred, in the likes of David Moore, in the likes of Professor Robert Beckford, in the likes of the Birmingham Connection, the Queen's College in Birmingham, and the Caribbeans have done marvelously well to champion the issue of decolonization, particularly the works of Robert Beckford articulates that excellently, calling Africans not to be enslaved or entrapped in the process of imperial Christianity, and having a sense of their own culture and standing up for what they believe as Africans. But having said that, I think also, I look forward to reading your book, because there's an aspect that I think is really, most African church leaders are not being sensitive to it. And that is the issue of religious networking, of which the question is, if you are networking, is it to the organization or on personal level, through which the benefits of the relationship, does it flow through the organization, or is just a photo shoot to stand by this gentleman in collar, and you put it on your table in the office and say, oh, I had a meeting with so and so, or it's just a status symbol for Africans. It's rather an irony that some African church leaders attend meetings at Westminsters, and it becomes the talk of the town. But the question is, are you meeting, is it perpetuation of the class structure to which you are political tokens at such forum to complete the agenda, or you are talking from the point or espousing the position of being at the margin, of which you want to be at the center, despite the fact that in terms of the continuum of margin and center, which is dominated by the fact that the historic denominations are the center, in terms of history, in terms of influence, in terms of resources, while you come in as a church that has assured the falling numbers in terms of church attendance. Does that reposition you to the center? No. You still have a marginal status in terms of institutional religion. And so there's a continuum whereby, okay, this religious networking puts people not necessarily at being at the center. And so there has to be the consciousness of saying, okay, what is this in terms of organizational transformation. For me, moving from the margin and coming to the center now, do we begin to hold conversations as being equal? Do we begin to talk together as having one faith? Or even the simple agenda of the meeting, does it reflect the interest of both parties? And so there is a need for a reflective engagement by some of our leaders to begin to understand the intricacies of this power structure. So that's very important. And even if you are, like you mentioned in your thesis, you said it's a lot easier for an African to come into ecumenical space with a white denomination. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot difficult for them to come into that ecumenical space without having a sense of superiority. Mm-hmm. And so those are issues that I keep on seeing, and it seems it's not, nothing is happening.
And I think, I mean, reflecting on that a few years after publishing Sent Forth, I see that dynamic even among us as Africans, that even in our own African circles, there are people that are at the center and there are people that are at the margins. And those dynamics don't change no matter what you do, right? And so as a Malawian doing what I do, I find myself at the margins in conversations with other African nationals, right? And I do not think we're going to move forward up until we get that right.
I agree with you. And if we are going to move forward, then there must be intentionality to do that. There must be a resolve to do that. If you are calling me to the table of communion, am I sitting as a guest or I'm sitting as joint here?
Sure. Yeah.
If you are calling me into a meeting, despite the differences in our liturgy, the differences in our ecclesiastical orientation, despite the differences in our doctrinal persuasion, but are you giving me that dignity as a human being? And you've talked about the concept very well. Ubuntu, do I have the same dignity? Okay, do you honor me with the same level of respect that I accord you? And these are deep issues. I think a lot has to be done about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad to see you do well in Nigeria. I love it when I see you working with Opoku Onyena in Ghana and others. I think that's the future, that we get to work together as African Christians, African Christian scholars, try to move the conversation beyond the national boundaries that were imposed on us by colonialism.
Well, it's, ecumenism is quite interesting. And I realized that while I was in England, most of the friends that I have, even within the academic space, are people of other culture, of other tribes I interacted with. And one of my close friends is David Moore, as a twin.
Yes.
Who is in Roehampton. And I always share the joke that we all bring something to the table. We all have our diversities, but coming together, we have a cloth that is likened to the coat of many colors.
Sure.
We brightens up our lives, we brightens up the fellowship.
Which is the
title? Not agree on everything.
What's the title?
But we have areas of commonalities that we can work together. And I think that's also important as scholars as well, sure. To collaborate, agree to disagree on intellectual principles of discourse, and I think is a way forward.
Okay, so I mean, a final thought question from me. You're currently involved in the training of future leaders for the African Church. How is that looking? How is that working? How is theological education looking on the continent?
I think the prospects are there. The prospects are quite good, but of late I'm beginning to reflect, particularly on curricular development.
Okay.
Because I realized that, take for instance, Kofi Christella in Ghana,
yes,
which was started by late Ghanaian scholar. Mm-hmm. That's in the person of Kwame Bediako, and they are doing marvelous well, and their effort is highly commendable. Sure. In the sense that they're heavily committed to enhancing ministerial formation, but yet they're equally interested in the intellectual stimulation and development of the ministers that attend their program. Sure. And their programs are all accredited, which makes it quite commendable, though they still run other courses along the line. And likewise here, we are seeing a significant paradigm shift, whereby Pentecostal churches also are beginning to warm up to academia, particularly theological education. It's quite interesting that a denomination that is close to us here, that's Anchor University, has affiliated their Bible college to the university right now, and which to many they say, "Oh, why? What is the whole essence of this?" But the reality is the fact that the critical edge required to deal with some of the issues in the contemporary society, particularly when you're talking about postmodernity and the likes, it requires a critical discourse, a critical engagement for these future leaders to grapple with and be stimulated, while still maintaining that spirituality is of essence in the life of the priest, and it must not be compromised. Sure. I've seen that repeatedly where I work. There's strong emphasis on moral formation as well as spiritual formation, which is quite the bedrock of the character of a Christian leader. But above all, the intensity also and the passion is that to get the next generation of leaders to also develop their intellectual ability along the things of the kingdom. So hopefully that's taking shape. The other bit also is the fact that we are having churches now interested in this particular development, which is a massive one. Various affiliations are now taking place whereby theological institutions are now affiliated with university. You realize that the Baptist Seminary now is now affiliated with Owen University, of which Liverpool Hope University have a commitment with them.
That's right.
Yes. And likewise, we have two affiliations with University of Badon Redeemers University as well. Life Seminary also is affiliated with University of Ibadan. You have the Presbyterian Seminary, which is in, I think, Abia, is affiliated with Abia State University. You have United Missionary Church Seminary in Ilorin, which is affiliated with University of Ibadan. These are church-based theological institutions, but that does not divulge us of our unique qualities as theological institutions in terms of ministerial formation. So we are now saying it's possible for you to be a minister and also be a scholar. The key things that must be maintain your spirituality,
Sure.
and you can also exercise your academic ability in the knowledge of the things of God.
Wow, that's really exciting. It changes the field altogether. It opens up possibilities of really good charactered Christians with a very good intellectual standing. So that's critical. I'm excited to hear that. I haven't been aware of that happening in East or Central Africa. I will explore, but if that's what's happening in Nigeria, I think it will catch on. And
I guess you know this trend is not new to South Africa.
Okay.
You'll find that most universities have given much space to theological education.
Okay.
Take, for instance, Reformed Church in South Africa, the Dutch Reformed Church, are actively involved in the Department of Practical Theology and Missiology in South Africa.
Sure.
And so those departments were initially more or less seminaries that were grafted into the university system to train academics and also seminarians. Sure. The only difference is the fact that if you want to go into academia, you go straight into it. And if you want to go into the line of the priesthood, you are free to go. And so they tend to develop along that line. So you find that level of development in South Africa, which is essentially very good. You also find it now coming up in East Africa with institutions that were formerly entirely Christian, now becoming part of the Faculty of Theology, now awarding degrees. And the evangelical movement in East Africa established their own institution at a point in time, which has now metamorphosized into a full-fledged university. So you find various changes going on along that line. But nevertheless, we still have various arguments with respect to the appropriateness of this. Some are still resistant to embrace that, while I know there is a tension that has to be maintained. Sure. The spiritual aspect of things, the ministerial formation has to be thorough. The spiritual formation has to be thorough. And likewise, the academic formation has to be thorough as well, so that the three components which are vital to the character of a Christian leader are not mortgaged. Well, it's a tension that has to be managed accordingly, not to be excessively on the side of intellectual formation to the detriment of spiritual formation, sure, nor ministerial formation. All the three components needs to be well managed properly, and this has to be through structured theological education, sure, structured spiritual discipline, structured ministerial components in theological training. So I think those areas are quite important.
Brilliant. Thank you. Any final words to people watching this?
Well, thank you for linking up again. It's a pleasure to have this discussion with you, and I think we should keep on the conversation, particularly in our field, and talking about this with an African eye, to keep a tab on mission, essentially the obsessive compulsion and lack of incarnational living from those who are involved in mission. Likewise, the prophetic role of African church leaders, which seems to be fading in the face of obsessive or compulsive, corrupt, laden society, is an area that I think missiology should focus more to be able to denounce the god of materialism and be able to challenge us to be incarnational in our orientation and in our character, that we can say it loud and clear, just the way Amos stood and said it. Jeremiah did the same thing, and they fulfilled their days. So we should not shy away from it, but talk about it in our publications, in our writings, to create awareness of all this. And so I think I look forward to such a time to be involved in such an enterprise if any comes my way.
Awesome.
So thanks once again.
Thank you so much. You have a good day.
Okay then, cheers, bye.
God bless, yes.